She sent an email on our way back. We'd already closed down, and I just wanted to mention that we bumped into that other herd of elephant, the elephant that we had smelt, that elephant that was in must. We found him. We found the whole herd, and it was a different group to the group that we had seen on drive. This was a group with a very tiny baby and a very, very big elephant bull who was in must. And the one thing that told me was a different herd of Ellies was the fact that he was in must, and we didn't. The bull that we saw with the group, that smaller group, he wasn't in must yet. And this kind of ties in with a question that we had in on email just after drive ended that I can address, and that just was from Linda asking if we can tell if any of the bulls in the group are in must, or do the must bulls stay away from the herd as solitaries? Well, kind of a little bit of both, Linda. The bull that we saw wasn't in must. The bull that I saw later, we're going to hopefully find him tomorrow. They were crossing Twin Dams Road on their way up to Weaver's Nest towards Philemon's Dip, and hopefully first thing in the morning we can have great weather. We'll go and follow up on them. Very wet conditions will be easy to follow a group of elephant. Now, this bull that was in must was tailing this herd of Ellies, and obviously there might be a female in estrus, and that's what the bulls do. They tend to tag along. They tend to follow the breeding herds. But you'll also find bulls in must on their own who are not in contact with breeding herds. So, anyways, it is time for me to talk to you about flowers and insects, and this is what I wanted to start with, was this. Oh, it's not going. Alright, never mind. You missed my opening shot. But I wanted to start with these flowers. This was a group of a plant that I'd never seen before, and this was at home in the Timbavati, funnily enough. This was an unusual flower in that it looked similar to a lantana flower, I think. Kind of a cross between the lantana flower and the coral senecio that I found in July that flowers in winter. But the plant is not a succulent. It's a very, very different plant. There's a slightly closer view of one of the heads, and then here even more of a view, closer up view of these particular flowers. Very, very pretty. The center grouping of those flowers are yellow, fading to orange. No, definitely not an agapanthus. Agapanthus doesn't grow like that. And, well, from that flower, let's move on. I'm going to go through things in alphabetical order. I will be able to answer the odd question. I will pop into... Sorry, just checking things. We'll pop into emails to check on things, but I am going to be looking through chat to see whether there's anything in chat. And Chris, yes, does look very much like a lantana, but it isn't. It's definitely not a lantana. It's a small plant that grows on the ground, and although the flower is similar, it has subtle differences. No, Laura didn't have a scent, and it's one of those things that I'm afraid I'm going to have to wait for an ID on that, or hopefully somebody might be able to help me with that. Anyways, here's something different. This was a baby armored cricket on a very small leaf, and a very tiny insect. It was only about a quarter of an inch long. And as that cricket grows, so is its armor going to grow, and somewhat of a defense against birds. That lovely big plate over its thorax with spines on it. And that's a physical defense that insects have developed. And there's another kind of a defense that you will see now. This is a close-up of one of the elegant grasshoppers. Now, I've shown you these before, but this is... I'm making a collection of just face shots, close-ups and eye shots of some insects. And I like the blurred motion that this had with just the center of this grasshopper in the shot. But one thing that I want to show you is that cricket that we had in the previous shot was a cricket that had a physical defense. It's still a very palatable insect to birds. But this is something that shows you that colouring is as strong as a physical defence. This is a warning to birds. The colouring is what we call aposematic colouring, and it shows that anything in nature that have these yellow, black, white, and red, orange markings, and any combination of those colours, can be potentially dangerous, and birds tend to leave them alone. And no bird that I know of will even touch these grasshoppers. They can be toxic, some of these species of elegant grasshoppers, pogomorphid grasshoppers. I just need to find another picture of something that was also the same kind of colouring. Oh, maybe I don't have it. That's a pity. I might have to come to it at the end of Fireside Chat. But here are some caterpillars. A very small one at the top there, just touching onto one of the bigger ones. That's how big it'll grow. And I'm not even sure what moth or butterfly these turn into. I seem to have misplaced a photograph of a spider that had the black and yellow markings that were exactly the same as that grasshopper. Let me see, maybe I can find it quickly while we're looking at this. And yes, Linda, a lot of these we find here in, not a lot, all of these we will find here in the Sabi sand. Seems like I didn't download it. I do have that photograph, but it's the wrong way around. I can maybe try and pull it up for you. Because I think it was quite relevant to... Sorry, I'm just getting a little distracted here. It's quite relevant to the whole black and yellow colouring thing that I was talking about, and it's quite important to make my point, but also just to show you how similar things can be. No, I'm sorry. It's going to take me too long to go through this and try and put it up for you while we're chatting. But it was a picture of the garden orb spider that I had that has almost identical colouring to that yellow and black ornate grasshopper or pogomorphid grasshopper. So moving on, we find something else that has colouring that is a deterrent to birds. Here we have a type of blister beetle on one of the lion's eye flowers. And although it's not as big as the big black and yellow blister beetles, it's still one of the blister beetle families. And showing the same kind of colouring. And these kind of beetles have an acid that they can exude from the base of their hind legs that is quite dangerous. It can blister the skin of humans quite badly. And this was a blister beetle that was eating the center of the flower. It was eating the stamens and the stigma. And that's on one of the lion's eye flowers, also known as Tricloceras. Anyways, moving on. I spent some time with a dung beetle and her mate rolling a ball. And she got very, very aggressive with the camera. And some of the photographs that I took, she was actually attacking the camera lens because she thought I wanted to steal her ball away from her. And as soon as I got the camera close to the dung ball, she would turn around and threaten me and the camera. And I just managed to get this wonderful shot of her and mate at the back of the dung ball. Now, very difficult to explain to you where the eyes are on a dung beetle. You can almost make them out. You can see the sort of shovel-shaped head of this insect, and where it joins the thorax on either side of that. Well, I don't know how to explain it to you, but on either side of the flat head you can see where just before it starts flaring out are the two little eyes. And yes, it has those spines on its legs. It uses those front legs to compact the dung and make the ball, and then it helps with rolling the ball. And it also helps, those spines or those spikes on the leg also help with fighting, with throwing other beetles off of the dung ball when there's a conflict, when there is a dispute over whose dung ball it is. Here's another one of her, a little bit closer up. I decided to do this in sepia. And that spade-shaped head that she uses to dig into the dung, serrated edge so that she can cut through it. And there you can almost see the black little dot of an eye where the head, in that shadowy part where the head joins the thorax. And Kathy, you're right, I did say something similar to that. And moving on, who's next? Let's go back to the flowers. Here is a flower. I mentioned on Drive a while ago that I found a flower that I seem to think was an orchid. It grew very similar to an orchid. I still can't find it. It's not in any of my books. I have seen it here. In fact, when I came back from leave, I saw one or two reaching the end of their flowering period. And I'm still not too sure what it is. Quite a stunning flower. No, those are the petals. That is how the flower looks, Chris. And I'm going to have to contact the Botanical Society and see if I can get some answer from them, or send it to the Botanical Gardens. Next on the list, something else that eats flowers, and I did mention it the other day. We were on drive and we saw one of the raisin bushes in flower, and I said the jewel beetles go for the raisin bush. And here is one of them. It's a close-up of one of the emerald jewel beetles. This is a more recent photograph. I have had flowers, or rather photos of these jewels on the raisin bush flowers from previous fireside chats from last summer. But this was one here in the Sabi Sand. This was outside my room, on the raisin bush outside my room. And, well, also known as a brandy bush. And that's what it looks like. That emerald, beautiful metallic emerald color that I'm sure is very difficult for artists to recreate. Now moving on from, let's go back to something else that's quite interesting. Something else that's green, the green things, caterpillars. Now unfortunately I didn't get any pictures up on the Mopani worms, and the Mopani trees were filled with Mopani worms. And amongst all the Mopani worms are these big emerald green caterpillars. This is a youngster, or rather a much smaller one. The one at the back is almost ready to pupate, and these turn into moon moths, very exquisite moths. The Mopani worms turn into big, almost emperor moths. I just thought this was just a lovely shot with the youngster in front of the adult at the back, having just finished that little Mopani leaf in front of it. Shelley, no, didn't manage to find any stick insects that were worth photographing. There are a few around. I've got a few around my room. They're mostly nocturnal, I have to add. And nothing nearly as exciting as the stick insect that I found that was fighting off the hornbill with Paula back in March, that one that I showed you. Now this is a photo similar to one that I had on the blog when the last blog that I did. It's a tiny little grasshopper in the center of the lion's eye flower. And that grasshopper was probably about 1 millimeter, maybe 2 millimeters long. Tiny little thing. And it took a number of photographs to finally get that one that was just not centered, but just positioned nicely in the frame. Going back to warning colors, I'm sure you're all going to, and sticking with the grasshoppers. Funny how, no, sorry, Linda, that wasn't a full-grown grass. That one little grasshopper on that flower will grow a little bit more. All of these are all hoppers. They haven't got their wings yet. They're all quite new. This is a slightly larger grasshopper, purple and yellow and black, and just one of the incredible things that we have. Well, not incredible, remarkable. Tiny little antenna. Here's another one from the other side. It was actually missing its left hind leg, but very strong coloration to tell birds not to touch it. What's quite interesting is how that yellow patch around the eye extends down onto the head. And yeah, it's purple. Purple and yellow. Next, what have we got next? I'm going all out of order. I had all of these things in order and that's way out of sync because, I don't know, I've just been doing random selections. So we've done that, and we've done that. What's next? I told you about the baby golden orb, didn't I? Now, on one of my bonsais, I have a bonsai baobab here. It stands about 2.5, maybe 3 feet tall. And I should have taken note of the date that this photograph was taken because this was a hatchling. It was its first web. It would have maybe molted once or twice in the egg case that it had spun, or rather the egg case that it had been born in, and then moved off from that, and this is probably one of the first webs that it had spun. Now I've blown this photograph up quite a lot because this spider was barely 1 millimeter long. I mean, it was this a little bit bigger than the head of a pin, and this is what they look like, the golden orbs, when they're very, very tiny. And I've got the same spider has now molted 3 times on this tree. I took a photograph of it today, and maybe next Remarkable Creatures that I'll show you. I'll show you the different growth stages of it and maybe dates of it. Chris, no, they're not poisonous. They're not venomous either. Another distinction there, just to remind everybody that if it's poisonous, it'll damage you if you eat it. If it's venomous, it'll damage you if it bites you. And no, the golden orbs, as big as they are not venomous. They're not able to damage humans. And I've handled them all my life without being bitten. Also, a lot of the web spinning spiders are not really capable of biting, just by the configuration of their chelicerae, their jaws. But that's a baby golden orb, and for those of you who know what our golden orbs are, that is where they start. And soon we'll be seeing some of the big ones. I have found one big one so far, one that I had to remove out of the road the other day. But there will be time to see others. Now, I've got a number of spider shots here, and I want to just show you the beauty of the spider world. This is a big euphorbia outside my front door, and this is a fold in the leaves of the cladodes, rather, of the euphorbia with one of the hairy jumping spiders. And I've got a few jumping spiders that I'm going to show you because they are probably one of the most comical and most interesting of all the spiders. I was watching one today chasing an ant, and you get these jumping spiders that mimic ants. They look almost exactly like the ants, and what they do is that they pounce on an ant, inject it with venom, and then they'll follow the ant until it keels over from the venom. Sorry, I'm just smiling at at JJ standing on a chair. JJ, they're harmless. Shelley wants to know if we have any venomous spiders in South Africa. We do. I think one of our most venomous spiders is the six-eyed crab spider, mostly found in Namibia actually, but in the dry western regions. Of course, we have the black widow, or black widow, the black house spider, Latrodectus, which is one of the most venomous spiders. We have violin spiders, not violent as in violence, but violin as in the stringed instrument, because it has the shape of a violin on its back. The violin spider is quite venomous, as well as the sack spider, which is one of the most venomous spiders. And those are about the three that one has to be concerned with. Sorry, Misha. I just wish that I could just spend 5 minutes with those of you who don't like spiders and show you how fantastic they are. Here's another little one. Another little jumping or salticid spider on the edge of a leaf of my baobab, peering over the edge, looking at the world. Most spiders have anywhere between 6 and 8 eyes. These jumping spiders have 4 eyes on the front, and they have another 2 on each side, giving 8 eyes. Now, this next photograph is another little jumping spider. This was back at home, and I noticed it running along the branch of this mapani tree with something in its mouth, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And it was only once I took the photographs and I managed to blow it up. It was actually a caterpillar that it had caught. And you can see just in front of the spider is a little round black dot, and that's the head of the caterpillar. It sucked most of the juices out of the caterpillar, and it's probably going to discard that shell soon. Here's a close-up of it from underneath, looking down at me with its prey in its mouth. These are the jumping spiders. They're some of the most fascinating of all. And staying with the jumping spiders, I've taken a couple of photographs and then only found afterwards that there's something else in the photograph. And here's one of them. This was a jumping spider on the edge of a leaf. And you can't see its eyes because there's actually a tiny little fly sitting horizontally across its face. And I was wondering how on earth it could see. And I was also wondering what the fly was doing. And it could be a parasitic fly. It could be, I don't know, it could be a type of fruit fly. But what it was doing on the spider's face, I haven't the faintest idea. But that is a very small spider, so you can imagine how small that fly must be. Okay, just to give you a break from spiders, just after the rains, a millipede on a raisin bush. And, covering its eyes, hiding away. Now, this is an interesting sequence. I barely have my I have my camera with me most of the time, especially in summer. This is a robber fly. They're actually a very nice fly, a very beneficial fly. And I just happened to see this. Unfortunately, by the time I did get my camera, this was one moment that I didn't have it right next to me, and by the time I got my camera, it had already emerged almost fully. I first saw it next to my little bird bath, just coming out of the ground. It was actually emerging out of its pupa case. And I managed to get 2 photographs of it just coming out of its pupal case before it emerged and flattened itself on the ground. And there it is, its first touch of soil as an adult fly. And just below the back of the abdomen, you can see the hole and the pupa case that it came out of. The wings are not yet pumped up. You can see the legs are still almost transparent. They must be very, very soft. And it takes time for its its outer skeleton to harden and to pump up its wings. And I managed to follow it while it moved around, trying to climb up to higher ground. And here it is, climbing up to higher ground. I can actually do better with that photograph. Getting off of the ground, away from ants, very vulnerable. in its current condition. There you go. I managed to zoom in on it. I've taught myself a few things here with Wirecast, and I can even do better than that. Watch this. Only it gets a little bit blurred because it's no longer zooming in on the digital image. It's zooming in on. I should have done that with one or two other things, but it's zooming in on the actually just increasing the size of the photograph itself. But that was the robber fly flying, or rather climbing higher, until finally in this photograph it got to the top of one of the euphorbia branches, and as you can see, the legs are a lot darker, the eyes are a lot darker, the wings were then fully extended, and it would have probably been a few minutes after that it eventually flew away. A long time ago, some time ago, I don't know if you remember, but I had, yes, Linda, the eyes do stay that big. A little time ago, I had pictures of this same type of robber fly that had caught a dragonfly. And this is probably one of the biggest of the robber flies. It was at least 2.5 inches long. Normally they're only about an inch or less. And I had an interesting experience with a robber fly just yesterday. We were getting the vehicle ready for Patrick's drive, and there was a moth on the spare tire at the back. And it was a beautiful little moth, and I thought I was going to remove it and put it on a tree because it was obviously waiting for nightfall. But as I touched it, it flew down onto the ground, and it barely touched the ground, and the same species of robber fly came out of nowhere and grabbed it in front of me. Of course, well, my camera wasn't with me, unfortunately. For those of you who are arachnophobes, here's an insect you will like. There's a small spider hunting wasp with one of the salticid, one of the jumping spiders. I managed to follow her for some time, and you see the weight difference and the size difference between the spider and this wasp. And yet somehow she managed to subdue it. She stung it. She put it into a state of suspended animation. And she took it. She must have dragged it, half flew, half dragged, for probably about 20 yards before she got it to its nest, her nest, which was a hole in the ground. There was a question earlier, actually, what camera I use. It's a Fuji shot. It's actually just a little, it's not even an SLR, it's not even I'll show you on drive. A lot of you can normally see the camera when I'm on drive. It's just a tiny little camera, but it's got a little zoom, or rather a little macro lens that screws in onto the end of the lens, and that allows me to get all these photographs. Of course, I can't focus anything. I have to move the camera backwards and forwards. Yes, a Fine Pix. Thank you, Andreas. Fuji Fine Pix. I think it's a 5600 or something like that. Dankeschön, Andreas. Ja, das ist die Kamera. Next is a remarkable shot. Now, this was opening for a drive one afternoon on quarantine. And I took, I don't know how many photographs. There was a pair of weevils, a pair of lovely blue weevils also known as snouted beetles. And I was desperately trying to get photographs of them. And none of the photographs that I got of them on this acacia came out very well. But this one shot, there were actually a couple of shots of this weevil as it took off from the tree. And one of the most colorful of the snouted beetles or weevils. Now the weevils are one of the largest family, or rather the largest groups of beetles, not insects, but just beetles. There's one type of beetle, and there are probably about 50,000 types of weevils alone, let alone all the other kinds of beetles that you get. Now see, if I'm trying to enlarge it somehow, unfortunately what's going to happen is we're going to lose. We can try something like that. As you see, I can't zoom in without losing a lot of the outer outline of the but they're a beautiful blue color with that beautiful red stripe on the wing. Quite remarkable, quite amazing. We're running over time, and I know we're running over time, and we're nearly finished. Unfortunately, these things always end too quickly. I think I've pretty much done most of it. This was just a friend of mine, one of the last. One of the last of this evening's edition. This is a friend of mine that lives outside my house, and I see it every time I go home, and I'm able to follow it. It's not a very timid snake. This is what we call a yellow-bellied sand snake. It is a harmless snake. It does have a back fang. It does have venom. But its venom is not really effective on humans. It's very effective on geckos and lizards, the type of prey that it hunts, specifically geckos and lizards. And this was actually coming out of a pipe that was lying outside my house. And just that lovely coloration, lovely markings on the top of its head. Each of those scales on the head of a snake actually have a name, and you can identify snakes by the number of parietals and different scales and the configuration of the scales on the head. I have to at least deal with those of you who have a snake phobia as well as those with the spider phobia. To close off, one photo that I have to show you because I know it's going to be an ah moment, and I know you all know who this is, and it's moving away from the little creatures, but I just had to show it to you. I think some of you will remember the day we were with the hyena at the den. Let's wait, there it is. It was an afternoon we were with them. Well, no, it was early morning. That's the western side of the den at the entrance. And it was just that wonderful, wonderful moment when the youngsters were playing all around Mum. And now in typical fashion, in closing, I normally close my show with a sunset shot, and I've got two for you this evening. And this is the one. Now, the tree that you see is a tree that I've photographed many, many times with the sunset, because that is just north of my house, back home in the Timbavati, and it's such a prominent tree. But what amazed me so much was the shape of the skull in the cloud. And that is totally untouched. I haven't done anything with that photograph. And just another day, the same tree, another day, different sunset, same tree. And you can actually see the Drakensberg, the escarpment just in the background above the tree line to the left of the photograph. So that's kind of the end of my presentation this evening. It's been a pleasure. Actually, before I go, I see there are a couple of emails. I better answer them. Tammy, person after my own heart, who also photographs the insects. Tammy, you're welcome. And Vivian, thank you for your email, just thanking me too. And the last one from Sass, wanting a picture of the bark spider web and show it on Re-Marcable Creatures. And yes, Sass, in fact, you know what I think I should do? I think we should actually get to a point where we can watch, or I'll try and film a bark spider spinning its web and maybe speed it up, because it only takes about 15-20 minutes. And yes, now that the bark spiders are growing and they're going to be coming out, we've had to wait the whole year, or the whole of autumn, winter and spring and most of summer before the bark spiders get as big as they are, so that I can film them again. But Sass, thanks for the reminder. I will try my best to get the bark spiders spinning their web. So from me and everyone here at Wild Earth, thanks for joining me. We're going to have elephants that we're moving up towards Philemon's Dip and Weaver's Nest. I hope we're going to find some tracks of them tomorrow. Hope you'll be joining me. Well, for me it's tomorrow. For some of you it's tonight. And hope you're going to join me for the drive, 5 o'clock Central African time. Let's hold thumbs and cross fingers that we don't have rain. So good night, everybody, and take care. God bless.